Have you ever felt like you were in a situationship with someone who did everything possible to avoid calling it a relationship? He'd ask you out. You'd exchange messages every day. There was affection, intimacy, even weekend plans. But whenever you asked, "What are we?" he'd dodge, change the subject, say you were rushing things, that what mattered was the here and now. And he'd drop that seemingly harmless but trap-laden line. Do we really need to put a name on this? That question isn't just about labels. It's about evasion, about bad faith. Sartre reminds us that human beings are condemned to be free, and to be free is to bear the weight of your own choices. When someone insists on keeping a relationship ambiguous, refusing to take emotional responsibility, what they're doing is running away, avoiding naming the relationship so they won't have to answer for it, so they won't be held accountable, so they can keep the doors open while enjoying your presence. It's a kind of sophisticated cowardice. He enjoys the company, the affection, the connection, but refuses to acknowledge that there are implications. Because to assume a bond is also to commit to the other as an end in itself, not merely as a means to fill a void. And perhaps that's what he fears. Losing the freedom to walk away whenever he wants, when reality becomes more demanding than desire. But what he doesn't understand, or chooses to ignore, is that even in running away, he is choosing. And that choice has consequences. When you accept that sort of undefined relationship, you're also choosing. Choosing to wait, betting that maybe he'll change, hoping for a sign that may never come. How many times have you postponed your own desires so as not to seem demanding? How many times have you stayed silent in the face of doubt because he looked at you with that charming smile and said, "Let's just enjoy the moment"? But you are more than just the moment. You are a project. You are freedom in action. And accepting anything less is trapping yourself in his dream instead of building your own. Sartre said that to love is to recognize the other's freedom and yet still choose to be with them. But when he refuses to define what he shares with you, he is not preserving freedom. He is denying the existence of a shared project. The question is no longer whether he will commit. The question now is, why are you still waiting for him to do so? What do you gain by delaying your own freedom to keep someone who won't fully choose to be with you? His silence is an answer. And the absence of a name, deep down, is already a name. Fear. Fear of himself, of his own freedom, and of the responsibility that comes with it. But you don't have to share that fear. You can choose something else. Something with a name, presence, and truth. So next time he asks, "Do we really need to put a name on this?" Maybe the most authentic response isn't an argument. Maybe it's simply, "Yes, we do." And the choice to walk towards someone who also wants to give what you build a name, body, and soul. Because love without a name may seem like freedom, but often it's just cowardice masquerading as modernity. Are you ready to stop accepting less than you deserve? Or will you keep justifying his silence with the hope that only you nurture? Think about it and choose. Because even not choosing is already a choice. He looks at you seriously, perhaps even with a half smile, and says, "Aren't you overreacting?" It seems simple, a common phrase, but behind it may lie one of the most perverse forms of emotional silencing, the denial of your reality. Let's be honest. How many times have you shared something that bothered you? A sudden disappearance, a veiled rudeness, a felt absence, and instead of listening, received judgment. Wow, such drama. You're being too sensitive. It was just a joke. This attempt to invalidate your experience is more than momentary contempt. It's a game, a defense mechanism, a way to evade responsibility for reflecting on one's own behavior. Jean-Paul Sartre said, "Hell is other people, not because others are inherently evil, but because under the gaze of the other, we are forced to see ourselves. And some people desperately flee from that." When he tells you you're overreacting, perhaps what he really means is, Don't make me face who I was in that moment. It's easier to shrink you than to recognize oneself as someone who hurt. It's more comfortable to say you're wrong than to confront the anguish of having been negligent. But let's go further. That question is dangerous because it turns you into the defendant. From victim, you become the one being judged. From a woman expressing her pain, you become the one making a mountain out of a molehill. This is a role reversal, and worse, it's a form of bad faith, Sartrean bad faith, because he tries to escape being what he is, wanting to be just the nice guy on the surface, refusing to bear the weight of his own behavior's consequences. Sartre said we are what we do with what has been done to us. And if, in the face of your discomfort, he prefers to silence you rather than transform his own attitude, he's choosing not to grow, not to love. Because love demands a willingness to listen, to be deconstructed, to be uncomfortable when necessary. You start doubting yourself, policing yourself, thinking twice before speaking. You swap "that hurt me" for "never mind." And so, little by little, you distance yourself from who you are to fit into the small space he offers. This isn't exaggeration. This is survival. And it's also imprisonment. How many times have you apologized for feeling? How many times have you accepted the role of the over-emotional one just to keep the peace? But what peace is that which demands you abandon yourself to keep him comfortable? What if you stopped today, looked him in the eye and said, "What I feel is valid. If it bothers you, perhaps the problem isn't my intensity, but your inability to handle real emotions." The world is full of men who call women intense because they don't know how to be deep, full of people who fear diving in and prefer to splash on the surface. So next time someone tries to diminish your pain with "you're overreacting," remember, it's not a question, it's a broken mirror. You can choose not to see yourself through it. You can choose to listen to yourself. You can choose to protect yourself. And above all, you can choose not to stay where your sensitivity is treated as a flaw. You're not overreacting, you're feeling. And that, my friend, is one of the most authentic ways to exist. He leans in a little, narrows his eyes, and says, "Are you really going out dressed like that?" It's not shouting, not a direct command, but it's also not an innocent question. It's an insinuation, a planted doubt, an attempt to make you look at yourself with distrust, as if suddenly something about you is out of place. And more than that, as if it's your responsibility to preserve his comfort, even when that means you must diminish who you are. Have you ever stopped to think how many times that question appears disguised as concern? "I'm just looking out for you. I don't want you to be stared at." It sounds protective, but it's possession. It sounds affectionate, but it's control. Jean-Paul Sartre reminds us that the other can become a threat to our freedom when they try to freeze us in a fixed image. By asking that question, what he really wants is not to know if you feel good. He wants to ensure you fit the frame he projects. The dress is just a pretext. The real annoyance is your autonomy, the fact that you choose for yourself how to occupy space, how to express your sensuality, your strength, your body. And that, for someone who fears free women, is unbearable. But look closer, he won't say that. He'll insist it's just concern, that you're too beautiful to not draw attention, that he's protecting you from wicked looks. But deep down, it's not about others. It's about him, about his discomfort in the face of feminine freedom, and about the often unconscious desire to mold the other to his own insecurity. Sartre spoke of being for others as the anguish of being seen, and many women live that anguish amplified, needing to dress, speak, and exist always from the standpoint of the man beside them. But you are not here to be the reflection of his fear. You are a project in motion. You choose, you build, you inhabit your body with the dignity of someone who owes no explanation to anyone about how she decides to exist. How many times have you gone back to your room, changed your outfit, reapplied a less striking lipstick, just so as not to set the wrong mood. How many times have you censored yourself in advance, trying to anticipate his discomfort? And what did that do to you? How many parts of you have been shrunk to fit a desire that wasn't even yours? Next time someone asks, "Are you really going out dressed like that?" Perhaps the most powerful answer isn't in words, but in the gesture of continuing on, your way, of going out exactly like that, as you chose, as you are. Because love doesn't want to reduce. True love wants to expand. And if he can't stand your presence in the world as it is, maybe the problem isn't the dress, but the mirror he hasn't had the courage to face. He furrows his brow, gives that awkward laugh, and blurts, "Why do you talk to so many guys?" It's not just jealousy, it's an attempt to turn freedom into guilt. He frames the question as if the issue were the number, but what truly bothers him is that you don't belong to him, that you still are yourself. This is how it starts. He begins mapping out your contact list, questioning interactions that were once neutral, turning every colleague, friend, or even stranger into a potential threat. But this question carries something deeper. It's a reflection of insecurity cloaked as interest, an attempt to convert autonomy into betrayal. Sartre reminds us that love is only real when it arises from two freedoms that choose each other, not from one trying to dominate the other. When a man asks why you talk to other men, what he often wants is not to understand. He wants to restrict, to reduce the world to himself, and that is not love. That is fear. Fear of not being enough, not having control, not knowing who you are when you're not by his side. But beware, he won't admit that fear. He will present himself as the man who cares, the one who just wants to understand, the one who can't handle your popularity. He'll make you feel like it's your obligation to prove loyalty before there's even a real bond. He'll demand emotional exclusivity without offering commitment. Have you found yourself over-explaining? Deleting harmless messages to avoid conflict? Stopping replies to friends because it might cause misunderstandings? Bit by bit, you close bridges. You isolate yourself. And worst of all, you start to mistake this for love. But love that demands silence, that constrains your freedom, that turns your friendships into sin, is not love. It's surveillance. Sartre said love should not want to imprison the other's freedom. Yet we still want to be someone's whole world. The problem is many men confuse love with territorial exclusivity, as if you were property rather than a person in constant transformation. How many times have you heard, "A proper woman doesn't mingle too much"? Those who respect themselves don't expose themselves so much. How many of those lines have you swallowed thinking they protected you, when they were actually cornering you? The question you should pose in return is, why does my right to exist freely bother you so much? If he loves you, he will love your network, your bonds, your voice in the world. He won't try to lock you into the acceptable box. When he'll walk beside you, not above you. He'll look at you with admiration, not with patrol. Next time someone asks why you talk to so many guys, perhaps the fairest answer is, because I am a whole woman who relates, who connects, who lives. And if that's too much for him, maybe he is too little for you. You can't accept me as I am. This question seems like a plea for acceptance, for unconditional love. But often it's the favorite shield of those who refuse to change. It's the best-stitched disguise for stagnation. At first you found it charming. He was intense, direct, maybe even a bit rough, but he seemed genuine. Yet over time, those behaviors began to hurt you. The roughness turned into rudeness, the honesty into lack of tact, the independence into indifference. And when you raised these issues carefully, he unleashed the phrase that dismantles any attempt at dialogue. Can't you just accept me as I am? Sartre said a human being is a project in constant construction. There is no crystallized, I am this way. We are what we choose to be, with every gesture, every decision. Saying, this is just how I am, is refusing the future. It's imprisoning oneself in a past that no longer fits. It's pretending that what you do cannot be revisited, rethought, transformed. When he asks you to accept him, without space for dialogue, without willingness to reconsider behaviors, what he's truly saying is, I prefer the comfort of my rigidity to the beauty of growing together. He doesn't want to be seen as a project, as a being in becoming. He wants to be treated as something finished that needs no change. And this stance, however comfortable it may seem, is a certificate of bad faith. To love someone is not to accept everything. It is to be willing to grow with the other, to re-examine oneself, to reinvent oneself. When you fall silent so as not to confront, when you accept everything as it is to keep harmony, you are not practicing acceptance. You are practicing self-abandonment. How many times have you heard yourself say, he is just like that? How many times have you buried a real discomfort with the excuse that he isn't much of a talker, doesn't show much, isn't good with words? But what about you? Who accepts you as you are? Who welcomes your sensitivity, your need for exchange, your desire to feel safe and chosen? This question, can't you accept me as I am, should be thrown back with another, and are you willing to grow by my side? Because accepting someone is not surrendering to inertia. It's also loving their potential, their movement, what they can still become. You're not here to be a spectator of his ego. You're here to build together. And building demands listening, demands revision, demands surrender. Sartre said freedom is what we do with what has been done to us. But there are those who use what was done to them as an eternal excuse for continuing to hurt those beside them. I'm like this because of how I was raised. I'm like this because I've suffered so much. These things may be true, but they can't be a perpetual justification for continuing to wound someone who's trying to add to your life. So next time someone tries to convince you to accept a frozen version of themselves that no longer fits the relationship, remember, you have the right to want more, to desire depth, to expect the other to also take responsibility for what they build with you. Accepting someone is not self-annihilation. It's inviting them into a pact of mutual growth. And if he's not willing to grow, perhaps it's not you who needs to change. Perhaps it's you who needs to leave. So tell me, how long will you keep accepting questions that are, in essence, disguised declarations of fear? Because that's what it's about. Each of those phrases, do we really need to name this? Aren't you overreacting? Are you really going out dressed like that? Why do you talk to so many guys? Can't you accept me as I am? Are attempts to be freedom, escape responsibility, avoid confronting their own choices. Sartre said human beings are condemned to be free, but freedom is frightening. Freedom demands awareness, and awareness demands action. That's why so many hide behind questions. Because while they ask, they don't decide. While they question, they delay. While they make you doubt yourself, they protect themselves from their own cowardice. But what about you? Will you continue playing that game? Will you keep silencing your discomfort, ignoring the void, convincing yourself that everything's fine, just because he's still around? Love is not mere physical presence. It's emotional commitment. Love is not absence of conflict. It's presence of truth. Love is not possession, not surveillance, not attachment to a fixed version of the other. Love is a pact between two freedoms that choose each other, knowing they could walk away at any moment, yet still staying. You deserve more than crumbs of affection conditioned on your submission. You deserve to be heard without being called overreacting. You deserve to walk as you please without being watched. You deserve friendships without being punished for existing in the world. You deserve a love that sees you as a project in expansion, not as something to be molded, pruned, controlled. From now on, how about trading these questions for others? No more, will he ever change? But why am I still waiting for that? No more, am I overreacting? But what makes me doubt my own pain? No more, should I adjust? But why am I dimming myself to fit? You are free. That's a burden, but also a promise. and no one will build an authentic life for you. That's your task. So breathe, think, and choose. Not what's easiest, but what's truest. In the comments, share. Which of these questions have you heard? Which one made you doubt yourself? And which one will you never accept in silence again? Because in the end, each question that diminishes us carries an invitation to a response that liberates us. And only you can decide which one deserves an answer and which one deserves to be left behind.